And welcome back to Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank. All right, guys, tonight I want to do a little channel update, a little Frankly Speaking update on what's going on here. I have been getting some questions from some of my subscribers here about the future of Frankly Speaking, particularly the Mussolini series that I'm doing right now, right? Mussolini, an Italian American perspective. And they want to know how far am I willing to go with this series and really what that means for the channel long term. Now, as far as the channel is concerned, I've done politics for a long time, and my political commentary ranges from, well, going back about 3 decades at least, from sort of this kind of quasi-libertarian position to more of a sort of normie conservative position, and now to more of an integralist third position that I take now. And, with politics, I find myself in a very unusual situation, difficult situation, in the sense that the position is not very popular because I wind up attacking both the left and the right. Now, for my part, I actually wind up spending more time attacking the right than the left because I just see the left as a bunch of Looney Tunes. I don't see a debate really to be had over there other than, yeah, I guess if you want to deal with everyday left and right politics, but from a philosophical standpoint, a deep and meaningful conversation, there's no discussing the issues with sort of this, quasi-communist left-wing woke thing that's going on over there. They're a bunch of deranged lunatics over there. As far as my friends on the right, I respect them. I do. Because I was there at one time. I know there's a lot of trad Catholics, especially lately, talking about how we shouldn't vote in these elections, so we just allow the system to collapse. They've been coming out and ripping a lot of the normie conservatives because they don't see the big picture. Um, I do understand that frustration because when you do talk to normie conservatives, they are blind to a lot of things. I think it's because, you know, right-wing talk radio is very powerful and very influential. And the problem there, of course, is that right-wing talk radio has a particular oligarchical slant to it. And conservative Inc., big conservatism, which is big time money in America, has certain players behind the scenes that are buying influence and a particular message that the right is allowed sort of to get out within the framework of this left and right paradigm. Anything that kind of goes outside that paradigm, it's verboten, it's scoffed at, it's laughed at, it's shunned at the end of the day. And in many ways, while conservatives do talk a big game on free speech, they really don't believe in free speech. They believe in selective speech, because there's many issues that the right, despite all their talk of freedom and liberty, are very hesitant, not only for them to talk about, but they want to allow others to talk about them without shutting them and sort of dismissing them as conspiracy kooks. This is why so many people on the right, as these conspiracies of sorts over the past 20 years have all come to light, are kind of, they're kind of bewildered about what to do with this all. I know, for example, the whole idea, to give you one example, of the medical industry making you sick in order to give you the cure, 10, 15 years ago, that was considered a kooky conspiracy theory. Well, there's many people on the right now starting to see that issue, that conspiracy of sorts. The 9/11 thing was shunned away by normie conservatives as a bunch of kookery by Ron Paul, kind of the Ron Paul wing of the right. Well, now there's more normie conservatives starting to question that as well too. And a lot of these things have unfolded over the last couple of decades as the country has shifted further and further to the left. So for me, as a guy that's an integralist, a guy that's third positionist, my my politics on this channel just doesn't garner a lot of attention. People don't understand the politics I talk about because, people want real solutions to problems. And ultimately, when I talk about sort of a Catholic society and rebuilding Christendom, people don't see a path there. And it's funny because I also take critiques from the other side, from a lot of Catholics who tell me that we shouldn't vote. And they lambaste me because I still do vote because they're saying, listen, let's just opt out, let the system collapse, and rebuild Christian society. And to that group, I say, well, how do you know Christendom is going to rise out of that? Especially when it comes to America, that really has no deep Catholic roots. The Protestant nation from origin. Um, I just think, again, I don't want Catholics suffering through a Stalinist-like buzzsaw or a French Revolution-like buzzsaw. And unfortunately, if the best America can do is a secular right-wing leader, well, I don't know what that looks like. And that's downright scary. And in a time where the church is it's suffering through its own problems right now, I don't know where Catholics go because without the church, you're still going to have the same fundamental problems of the fallen nature of man that consumes any supposed Catholic system right now. So that's why I'm in no man's land. That's why I'm willing to work with the current system right now until really God reacts to us and God responds to us in that respect. Um, we're living in very strange times post World War II. And so for me, my third position is politics just doesn't garner a lot of attentions. I'm attacking the left, I'm attacking the right. And I guess as a channel moving forward, I could do these videos, I'll do politics, don't get me wrong, but when I'm only getting 30 and 40 hits on some of these videos, it's truly frustrating. Um, and so that's where the Mussolini series comes in, and also the Integralist Chronicles. And the Mussolini series, I'm 26 parts into this now. And people ask me, am I becoming a Mussolini channel? Well, I'm not saying I'm becoming a Mussolini channel. When I decided to, take on or open up, frankly speaking, as a channel, I've always had partners in the past when I've done this podcasting stuff, and I wanted to do something that was uniquely me, sort of through my experiences in life, the way I see things, and the things that I'm interested in. That's what I do here, right? And you know, for me, it's just the Mussolini thing is partly that I have a fascination with not only Mussolini but Italian fascism as an Italian, especially trying to figure out the proper context of history, which we've been lied to a lot about by liberal and communist historians. And really the revelations that I found studying this era of history from more nuanced historians and trying to present that story to my audience here in a more nuanced way, in a more balanced way. And I think I've done that. And I've come to see a historical figure like Mussolini, um, sort of in a different light than the sort of cartoonish caricature that the liberal West and the communists have made of this historical figure, where he's kind of described as a buffoon and an irrational idiot and a mass murderer. And then you look into Mussolini, and while he made some mistakes, you find that he was actually a pretty smart guy, and he cared about Italy, and he had a lot of good ideas, despite some of the mistakes he made. So. So for me, as far as this channel is concerned, the irony is that that series that I'm doing on Mussolini is what garners the most attention on this channel. And while I'm getting, 25, 30, 40 hits on my political channel, most of my Mussolini videos now, they garner 150 to over 200 views. And that's kind of what keeps me motivation for going in that series. And there's a lot to talk about in that series. I break it down. And I think the other reason why I do that series, and I'll continue to do it, is because it's a very unique series, a deep dive of Benito Mussolini, Italian fascism. How many people really do that, especially from a more moderate sort of nuanced position rather than a typical sort of libertarian, communist, classical liberal perspective? It's like I tell, a lot of people when they ask me about it, type in Benito Mussolini in the search engine in YouTube, and all you find is a far left kind of, hey, here's the mass murderer, the man that destroyed democracy, the man that did all these terrible things. And yet you read the history books itself and you find that, well, the worst you could say about Benito was he was a mild dictator, a very mild dictator in Italy in the 1930s 20s and 30s. And the impression that's left generally on sort of the YouTube world is something completely different than what I've read. And I try to present these nuances and these, these more balanced kind of perspective on this series. Um, and again, because it garners just more attention than my political videos and my cultural videos, it's probably something I'll stick with because I believe there's a little bit of a market here, right? The other thing I've noticed too since I started the series is my subscription rate has gone up. I remember before I started the Mussolini series on this channel, I was stuck at like 150, 160 subscribers. And I went almost like 9 months, I think, without picking up a new subscriber. And then I started this Mussolini series, and I've been averaging 2 to 5 new subscribers per week. Again, I'm a tiny channel. I don't go out there, I don't buy views, I don't buy subscribers anywhere. I'm just a guy that just puts the stuff out, and hopefully word of mouth gets out and people like the channel and the product that I put out. I try and be fair and balanced to history in the best way that I can. But right now, the Mussolini series is what's keeping me going on this channel. And it's something I'll continue to do. I'll continue to deep dive into that era of history. I may even expand out to the church in that era too at some point, particularly the pontificate of Pope Pius XII and how all that broke down. Well, maybe I'll do Pope Pius XI and Pope Pius XII because I just find that era of history, World War II, fascinating. Some of the nuances there, particularly as the enemies of the church have attacked her at that sort of point in history in order to discredit her in the eyes of history. Um, and I may venture it down at that point, but as far as the Mussolini series, I'm going to continue to go forward. It's not going to come in any chronological order. Whatever deep dive I do into Mussolini, Italian fascism, it'll be kind of what comes to my mind in that moment, what I'm reading, what hits me, and I run with it. So I'll skip back and forth in history, but I'll pick a particular theme or a particular topic or a particular year and just give you the presentation in that series. And moving forward, that series I think is going to be a long running series. How long? I don't know, but I'll continue to roll with that. The other series I'm doing here, of course, is the Integralist Chronicles. Now, the Integralist Chronicles is kind of my story, my journey, and how I see the world and how I came to become sort of this kind of Catholic integralist thinker in the way I view the world through my eyes, my experiences, my history. And I kind of look at it from a very personal perspective. And it's my story that I'm giving you guys and giving you sort of a political sort of perspective from how I came to see and believe the things that I do. And that's a very special series for me as well, too. Um, because that's a series I don't read any history books. That's a series that I don't study for. That's a series that I'm not researching. That series is purely Frank and the way I see the world and the way the world has come through sort of my eyes. And that's what I present to you there. Now, that series is one where, you know, it cut one of those videos whenever something triggers my mind about what happened back at some point in my life that kind of, triggered this sort of political idea or cultural idea. I talk a lot about culture in that series, right? Particularly to break down the family and culture, because as I said before, I've seen it all break down in my lifetime. And I think it's a unique history in that sense for people that are willing to see it as a Catholic that lived in a sort of this morally decadent Western liberal society and how it all broke down. And while I was born after the sexual revolution, I was born in 1971. There was enough that I saw in the 80s and the 90s um, to really highlight the total degeneration, the devolution of American society. And that's what I try and do on that cast. And see, the cultural stuff is difficult for a lot of people. The leftists don't see it at all because generally leftists come from broken families or sort of a very liberal perspective. The conservatives themselves, mired in sort of American sort of you know, libertine, freedom, and liberty always have this great contradiction with how we establish social constructs because you're not supposed to have social constructs in America because of the whole freedom and liberty thing. And then they have this great contradiction on how to sort of create a vibrant culture that doesn't kind of deteriorate, right? They don't have an answer to this problem. It's why I tell my conservative friends all the time with this Donald Trump victory, don't expect him to be the savior of the nation. He's a businessman. He's going to come in and make a few tweaks. He got into power because the inflation was terrible and people couldn't feed their families anymore. But he's not going to solve the problems of the culture. He's not going to solve the problems of the destruction of the family. He's not going to be able to clean up government in 4 years as much as it needs to be cleaned up. I predict that actually, he'll do very little at the end, but I'll give him a few months before I start critiquing him. I'll see what his plans are the first 90 days. But, that leads to the point here is that, with the Antagonist Chronicles, that's a baby. That's my baby as well, too, along with the Mussolini series. And those are two series that I'll continue to do, along with my, political videos or other historical videos that I do every once in a while. My Catholic apologetics I do every once in a while, and we'll go with that. I think the other series I'm pondering, I think I mentioned this earlier, is maybe a series on the church during that World War II era, because that's what I'm invested in right now, particularly with the slanders against Pope Pius XII, who was a good pope, doing the best he could in a very difficult time. Lots of his detractors, especially lots of Jews, okay, I'm just going to be honest here, have gone after him for what they claim is a lack of support for the Jews at that time. I think that's a complete, I don't know. I just don't see it that way. I don't see it that way at all. And at some point, I'll tackle that issue in regards to the church in that era, and we'll tackle that on. But apart from that, um, I think that's pretty much it. I just want to cover that. I think just to answer the question, the Mussolini series is going to keep going forward. For how long? I don't know. Maybe at some point I get tired of it. Maybe at some point I don't have a passion for it, and maybe I'll stop it then. For now, I still do. I'm doing lots of reading right now. Um, I really don't have a plan yet as to what's next. I think I've done 26 parts already. I don't know what part 27 is going to be yet. I have some ideas. Right now, I'm trying to finish up Botch Victory by Patrick Peters, right? Botch Victory, How World War II Caused Vatican II and Corrupted the Christian West. That's what I'm reading right now. After that, do we got anything on the reading list after that? I think there's another book I have. I don't remember it now. Um, but this is fascinating, particularly because it talks about Italy a lot. It talked before and after the war and what got us to Vatican II. Maybe I'll cover that topic at some point. I'm just very hesitant to talk about deep church issues because I'm not a theologian, right? I'm fine with some basic Catholic apologetics, especially dealing with Protestants. But when it comes to the deep church issues, with so many divisions in the trad world, all pointing fingers at each other, I just don't know if it's my place. I love Holy Mother Church. I'm her greatest defender. And so I don't know what I can and can't say. I know there's many Catholics out there that have asserted themselves. They know for sure that the gates of, well, not the gates of hell prevail, but the fact that Rome has gone under, right? The prophecy of La Salette, right? That the Antichrist will come to sit in the chair of Peter or Rome or whatever it is. And then, of course, I hear other prophecies of um, the Antichrist rising somewhere in Israel, apparently. I don't know, which in and of itself seems like a contradiction. But but the point here is that this is stuff that with the deep theology, the prophecy stuff, I know a lot of Catholics lean on this. And I find it fascinating. I've studied some of it over the years myself. Don't get me wrong. But I just wonder about the interpretive principles and whose job it is to really study these things, because it seems like to me that we're almost creating a gospel of private revelations amongst many Catholics. And I know they've read all these different Catholics out there and they believe they got the right message. They see the complete picture. I get that. I'm just not sure. I can subscribe to that. I'm a guy that says, Lord, lead me. Um, you know, if you're telling me that the ape of the church has taken over the church and now we all have to go to some underground church that, doesn't control the buildings or the institutions anymore, fine. I can see that in a way, but I don't know whose job it is to make that call because at the end of the day, all the trads are pointing fingers at each other. That's the interesting thing about it. The set of candidates are pointing fingers at everybody, and then you got sort of the pseudo trads and the SSPX, the FSSP, and everybody believes they have the right gospel. And it seems like, at least online, the Catholic world has turned into sort of, hey, my gospel is right, everybody else's is wrong. And I don't know what happens to all those people that just simply have a simple faith and are incapable of siphoning through all the troubles within the church. That's not to say we don't see the problems in the church, but how we siphon through these things and who's got the right message and who reads the prophecies right and who's a real trad and who's not a real trad. It's a very confusing world at the end of the day. It's a very confusing time. And that's why I generally don't take that on because I have questions myself. Now, admittedly, I haven't looked as deep into those issues, as I probably should have, but only because, again, I try and deal with real world events, things that have a practical application to everyday life. And that's what I try and do. Um, this is why I still vote in the system, even though many Catholics tell me we shouldn't vote. And I try and relate history and politics to in a way where people can still practically apply themselves and try and live life in according to God's will, but also try and live a real life rather than in a constant state of fear because of online trads that are telling us these prophecies are bringing about the end of the world. And while I would never question God's will about when the end times are coming or when the Antichrist is coming, um, there's also been lots of false messages and lots of mistakes made by these people who think they have the right answer. So, and if we're going to live in a world where we start to question public revelation to follow private revelation, exclusively private revelation, because that's what it seems like at times. I don't know what that means for Catholics. I really don't. I don't. And that's not to say that I don't see the problems with Pope Francis. I don't see the problems with the church right now, the hierarchy. I know there's been an infiltration. I just don't have an answer for it. Right. So, all right, guys, that's it. So I'm going to continue on the Mussolini series. I'm going to continue on the Tractors Chronicles, and I'll throw in another video here and there about politics, culture, society every once in a while as they appear. So there you have it, guys. That's a Frankly Speaking update. I want to thank you for joining me. Good night, everybody.